Devon was a typical teenager, smart, cheerful, and energetic. At 16, he enjoyed riding his bike through the streets of his hometown. A black boy with thick curls and a bright, open face, he always stood out for his friendliness and calm demeanor. From an early age, his parents taught him to be polite and to act with integrity, even when faced with unfairness. His father, the town's mayor, was a role model for Devon, a strict but just man who believed in dialogue and equality. On this particular day, Devon decided to ride along the bike path that ran down the main street. The sun was shining brightly, and a gentle breeze brushed his face. He pedaled leisurely, enjoying the moment, occasionally smiling at passers-by. This route was familiar to him and he felt safe here, but his peaceful ride was suddenly interrupted. At a busy intersection, a white police officer appeared from around the corner. The tall, broad-shouldered man with a stern expression immediately focused his attention on Devon. His piercing gaze scanned the teenager from head to toe, carrying an air of suspicion and hostility. The officer blew his whistle sharply, signaling Devon to stop. "Hey, you!" the officer barked, stepping forward. Devon slowed down and, without protest, came to a halt. The officer approached, his face a mixture of irritation and authority. He placed his hands on his belt, a stance that clearly conveyed his sense of power. "What are you doing here?" the officer demanded abruptly. Devon, slightly startled by the tone, responded politely, "Just riding to the park. Isn't this a bike path?" "None of your business what this is," the officer snapped. His voice grew harsher. "I said, get off the bike." Devon froze in confusion. He couldn't understand what he had done wrong. There were no signs prohibiting cycling, and the bike path stretched along the entire street. Nothing suggested he was breaking any rules. Devon tried to explain. "Excuse me, sir, but I don't think I'm—" "Don't get smart with me," the officer interrupted, a cold smirk forming on his face. He stepped closer, grabbed the handlebars of Devon's bike and yanked it forcefully. Devon lost his balance and tumbled to the ground, hitting his shoulder on the pavement. Nearby pedestrians, witnessing the scene, slowed their steps, but none stepped forward to intervene. Some glanced cautiously at the officer, while others deliberately avoided looking at all. A tense silence filled the air, broken only by the officer's voice. "Remember this, boy. This isn't the place for someone like you." Those words stung more than the pain from the fall. Devon felt anger welling up inside, but he restrained himself. His father had always told him that maintaining composure in any situation was a sign of strength. He wanted to respond, but sensed it would only make things worse. "Can I go now?" Devon asked quietly. The officer smirked again, looking down at him with disdain, and nodded. "Get out of here before I decide to haul you in." Devon picked up his bike, brushed the dirt off his clothes, and walked away without saying another word. His face showed no tears, but inside he was boiling with anger and humiliation. He felt the weight of the stares from passers-by, yet no one offered help or even a word of support. As he walked, questions swirled in his mind. Why did he do that to me? What did I do wrong? Or is it not about what I did, but who I am? The officer's words, "Someone like you," echoed in his thoughts, leaving a bitter mark. Devon knew he had been wronged, but he didn't yet understand how to fight back. Devon returned home earlier than planned. Usually, after a bike ride, he felt refreshed and full of energy, but this time he was downcast. His hands were trembling, and his shoulder stung from the scrape he got when he fell. As he opened the front door, the familiar sound of clattering dishes greeted him. His mother was in the kitchen preparing lunch. "Devon, is that you?" she called out, peeking through the door. As soon as she saw him, she noticed his anxious expression and disheveled appearance. "What happened?" Devon wanted to respond calmly, but his voice faltered. He set his bike down in the corner, took a deep breath, and finally blurted out, "Mom, something weird happened today. A police officer, he shoved me, right in the street." Her face darkened as she froze in place. "What do you mean, shoved?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. She moved closer, inspecting the scrape on his shoulder. "Tell me everything." Devon tried to hide how deeply the incident had hurt him as he began recounting the events. He described how the officer had stopped him, how he tried to explain that he was just heading to the park, and how the officer grabbed his bike and pushed him to the ground. When he repeated the officer's words, "This isn't the place for someone like you," his voice trembled with a mixture of hurt and anger. His mother listened carefully, her face remaining calm, but her clenched fists betrayed her frustration. She had heard stories like this before, but now it was her son who had been targeted. It felt personal. "And no one stepped in to help?" she asked softly. "No," Devon replied, avoiding her gaze. "They just watched, or acted like they didn't see. And it seemed like he enjoyed it, Mom, like it was fun for him." She sat down at the table, motioning for him to join her. She was trying to find the right words to calm him. "Devon, you did the right thing by not arguing with him, but you need to understand something. This kind of behavior can't go unchecked. I'm going to talk to your father about this. He needs to know." "Do you really think that'll change anything?" Devon asked skeptically. "He's just one of many like that. Tomorrow, someone else will be treated the same way I was." She looked him in the eye and took his hand. "Maybe we can't change everyone," she said gently, "but we can change what's happening here, in our community. Your father is the mayor of this city, and he knows how to fight for what's right. And you're our son. We'll make sure this doesn't happen to you again." Later that evening, Devon's father, the mayor, returned home from a council meeting. The tension in the house was palpable, and his wife greeted him at the door to explain what had happened. As she recounted the incident, his expression shifted from shock to quiet anger. But he knew he couldn't react impulsively. He needed to approach this carefully and strategically. When the mayor entered the room where Devon was sitting, his demeanor was calm but serious. "You did the right thing, son," he said, sitting down beside him. "You didn't escalate the situation. That takes courage." Devon looked up at his father. "But doesn't that just mean he'll get away with it?" Devon asked, his frustration evident. "He humiliated me, Dad. And if I wasn't your son, what would have happened then?" The mayor paused, considering his son's words. Devon was right. Many people who faced similar injustices didn't have the support system or platform that Devon had. This incident was bigger than just their family. It was a reflection of a larger issue that couldn't be ignored. "Tomorrow, we'll start taking action," the mayor said firmly. "You're not alone, Devon. And we'll make sure this doesn't happen again, not to you and not to anyone else." Those words gave Devon a glimmer of hope, but the pain and humiliation still lingered. He struggled to accept that this had happened simply because of who he was. But now, he had a sense of purpose. His father's resolve reassured him that this injustice wouldn't be swept under the rug. The next day, the mayor acted decisively. In the morning, he sent an official request to the police department, demanding a detailed report on officer assignments from the previous day. He knew that every word Devon had told him would need to be backed up with evidence. This wasn't just about defending his son, it was about exposing behavior that went against the values of the city he led. By midday, the information was in his hands. The officer patrolling the area during the incident was identified as Charles Henderson. The mayor's suspicions deepened when he learned that Henderson already had a history of complaints for aggressive behavior. While none of the complaints had resulted in disciplinary action, they painted a clear picture of a pattern. Armed with this knowledge, the mayor felt more confident that this case could serve as a turning point, but he needed to handle it carefully. That evening, the mayor called for an emergency meeting of the city council. Representatives from the public, the media, and the police force, including its chief, were invited. The meeting drew a large crowd, with residents filling the chamber to capacity. Officer Henderson, unaware that he would soon be at the center of the discussion, attended in uniform and sat at the back of the room. The mayor began his address with a serious tone, avoiding direct accusations but making it clear that this was no ordinary meeting. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we often talk about justice and equal treatment for all. We pride ourselves on being an open and fair community, But sometimes events occur that force us to confront uncomfortable truths about the gaps in our systems. The room fell silent, the weight of his words holding everyone's attention. Yesterday, an incident occurred that struck me not just as a father, but as the mayor of this city. My son, Devon, was riding his bicycle on a public bike path when he was stopped by a police officer. Devon had broken no rules. Yet, this officer saw fit to humiliate him, to push him off his bike, and to say words that I can barely bring myself to repeat. The mayor paused, allowing his words to sink in. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Many residents respected the mayor and his family and were shocked to hear about the treatment Devon had faced. "If this can happen to my son," the mayor continued, his voice steady but firm, "a teenager who simply wanted to go to the park, imagine how many others face similar treatment and feel powerless to speak up." At this, several members of the audience nodded, and whispers grew louder. Charles Henderson, sitting at the back, suddenly stiffened. The realization hit him. This wasn't a general discussion. This was about him. His face paled, and he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The mayor continued, addressing the broader issue without naming Henderson directly. "We cannot build a community based on trust if those who are sworn to protect us act without accountability. This is not just about one officer or one incident. It is about creating a culture where every resident feels safe and respected." One reporter raised a hand and asked, "Mr. Mayor, what will happen to the officer involved in this incident?" The mayor met the reporter's gaze and answered clearly. "The matter has been referred to the police department for investigation. I trust that they will conduct a thorough review and take appropriate action. But let me be clear, this is about more than one individual. This is about the system that allows such behavior to go unchecked." The audience erupted in applause. Henderson, however, felt the walls closing in. The investigation was inevitable, and his record wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. The next day, local newspapers picked up the story of the mayor's son and the police officer. The city buzzed with discussions about what had happened, with many residents sharing their own experiences with the police. Devon's story became a catalyst for a broader conversation about fairness and justice. The police department, under pressure from the public and the mayor's office, moved swiftly. Surveillance footage from a nearby camera confirmed Devon's account. Henderson had stopped him without cause, acted aggressively, and shoved him off his bike. The department concluded its investigation by suspending Henderson without pay, pending a disciplinary review. The mayor knew this was only the beginning. The public's attention was now focused on the issue, and it was his responsibility to ensure this momentum led to meaningful change. Devon, meanwhile, watched as his father worked tirelessly to turn his experience into a moment of progress for the whole community. For the first time since the incident, he felt a sense of hope. The story quickly became public knowledge. Newspapers, social media, and television broadcasts buzzed with reports about the incident involving the mayor's son. The case didn't just spark outrage in the town, it reverberated in neighboring communities, highlighting the need for police reform. But the mayor knew that talk alone wouldn't solve the issue. Action was necessary. A few days after the initial council meeting, another assembly was held. This time, the mayor introduced a formal initiative to create an ethics oversight program for the police department. The proposed measures included mandatory training on community relations, the establishment of an independent review board for complaints, and stricter evaluation of officers' disciplinary histories. The initiative sparked lively debate, but most residents voiced their support, recognizing it as a step toward accountability. Meanwhile, the police department concluded its investigation into the incident with Devon. Footage from a nearby surveillance camera confirmed Devon's account. Officer Charles Henderson had stopped him without cause, used aggressive language, and shoved him off his bike. The evidence left no room for doubt. Henderson was promptly terminated for violating professional conduct standards. Despite Henderson's dismissal, the mayor believed that justice required more than punishment. It required understanding. At his request, Devon agreed to meet with the former officer in a neutral space at the town's community center. Henderson arrived looking defeated. The confidence and authority he once displayed were gone. Losing his job and the respect of his peers had clearly shaken him. Devon, on the other hand, carried himself with quiet strength. Although he was still processing the humiliation he had endured, he felt ready to confront the man who had wronged him. "Why did you do it?" Devon asked, his voice calm but firm. "You didn't know me. You didn't have any reason to treat me like that. So why?" Henderson hesitated, lowering his gaze. "I don't know," he said finally. "I thought maybe you were someone who might cause trouble. I guess I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Devon repeated, his tone sharpening. "You mistook me for a threat just because I was riding my bike? You didn't think it would have consequences?" Henderson shook his head. "I was wrong. I admit it, and I want to apologize," he said, his voice trembling. "I didn't think it would go this far." "That's the problem. You didn't think," Devon replied. "Your actions show that you're used to getting away with this kind of behavior. But actions like yours destroy trust and they hurt people. This time you just pushed me off a bike. What happens next time?" The weight of Devon's words hung in the air. Henderson couldn't argue. For the first time he seemed to truly reflect on the impact of his actions. The meeting gave Devon a sense of closure. Though the wounds from the incident hadn't completely healed, confronting Henderson allowed him to reclaim his dignity. His family stood by his side, proud of his courage and maturity. Devon's story became a rallying cry for change in the town. The new ethics program proposed by the mayor was quickly implemented. Young police recruits began attending mandatory training sessions on equitable treatment and cultural sensitivity, while a newly established ethics board took charge of investigating citizen complaints. For Devon, the ordeal was a life-changing experience. He realized that resilience and calm in the face of injustice could bring about meaningful change. His friends and neighbors rallied around him, and many residents shared their gratitude for his bravery in speaking out. The town, too, began to change. People started having more open conversations about fairness, accountability, and respect. Devon's experience had lit a spark that encouraged others to share their own stories and demand progress. What began as an act of unwarranted aggression ended as a transformative moment for the entire community. This chapter of Devon's life closed with a powerful lesson. Even in the face of injustice, it's possible to fight for what's right and be heard.